Hey there. Welcome to another episode of Faith Infused Leadership. This is Debbie Heiser coming to you live in my new office. And I wanted to talk to you today about a topic that's been near and dear to my heart recently in regards to servant leadership, what that means. And I'm actually getting ready to tape a 6-part segment about servant leadership and the characteristics of servant leadership. But what's on my heart today is something that infiltrates through all of those characteristics and infiltrates through when we as servant leaders or we as leaders are leading our people, and that is courage. We don't talk a whole lot about courage and what that means in leadership. And so today I just want to dig in a little bit, investigate just a little bit about what some of that might mean to me. And I'm hoping some of this resonates with you. So when I think about courage as a leader, it's kind of a two-pronged approach. One is having courage with the people that we're leading, and the other is having courage within ourselves. And I want to talk first about having courage within ourselves, because for me personally, I find that I have to be courageous with my own self before I'm able to have courage to lead other people through an event, whatever, just leading people through a vision in a business, whatever that is. And so when I think about that, I also think about the fact that we're pretty tough on ourselves. I was listening to a good friend of mine who is going to be on our next episode, Piper Dominguez. She was on live today and was talking about love and how we're pretty critical of each other. Or of ourselves, excuse me. And so really making sure that when we look inward, that we're looking with a lens of curiosity and not the lens of judgment. So many times we can judge ourselves, then we start to squirrel out. I have a little squirrel here on my desk to remind me not to squirrel out. And yes, I do have a stuffed squirrel on my desk. And so as you look at that, really looking at your behaviors, what you're doing with curiosity to figure out, what can I do better at that? So good, better, best. What can I do to better myself in that area? And so really, as you look at curiosity, it's also then about continuously turning the lens of awareness onto yourself. And I know as a leader, I have learned more about myself. And honestly, through my master's program at Gonzaga, I spent a good 2.5 years in that program, really turning the lens of awareness onto myself, knowing who I am. I always say that it's difficult for people to follow if you don't know yourself. And so as you turn that awareness onto yourself, looking in multiple different avenues, when I work with clients, we look at the whole picture because life needs to be deeply satisfying. And I don't mean, sometimes people get wigged out by the word servant. Sometimes they get wigged out by the word satisfied. And I don't mean satisfied as far as sitting on your laurels. What I mean is a deeply satisfying, like soul filling life that you have. And it's important when you're in business to look at all of the different avenues, to look at relationships, to look at ways that you interact in the community and what do you give back to the community, to look at your career. What do you want your career to look like? How long does that last? Do you value flexibility? Those types of things. Also finances. What do you want your finances to be? I talk to many small and medium-sized business owners that don't think about saving for retirement. And then they get to the end and their runway and they don't have funds to live on. And so it's looking at all of those areas as a leader and saying, how do I want to lead in those areas of my life and show by example? The other part of courage, I think, and also I want to step back because please feel free to drop some comments in Facebook. If you're listening on iTunes, feel free to add some comments in a rating, but I'd love to engage in some conversation around this because courage does mean multiple things. And it's also about just doing the thing. We all have these terror barriers that we come across. And as we step into things, sometimes we can run away from it because we're so afraid of it. And so it's about walking forward into the fear instead of away from it. I found when I walk away from the fear, it gets bigger. And it's interesting. Shonda Rhimes has a book called The Year of Yes. And she talks about, too, if you're afraid of something, when you vocalize that fear, it loses its power. And it's so very true. When I think about launching a group program, when I think about stepping into my business and my financial goals or my career goals or my relationship goals, um, my spiritual goals, sometimes I dream really big, and those can be frightening. And it's about stepping in and, again, turning that lens of awareness onto yourself and curiosity to figure out then what are the stories that I've got connected to something that's causing me not to step forward. And in some cases, I'm a business consultant and a leadership coach. I have a business coach that also helps me to look at things through a different lens. And so just making sure, too, that you're doing the thing. One of the things that I find working with many business people, and I've experienced this too, is that I have these plans, and then it's almost as if part of the fear is that I start to question whether or not I'm worth holding commitments to myself. I'm breaking commitments to myself because I don't feel worth it. And so really digging in and doing those things and doing the work to find your own self-worth. If I know that I'm worth keeping commitments to, then other people are going to see that and model that as well. Now, granted, a lot of times as leaders, we'll hold commitments to other people at our own expense. And there's got to be, I don't like the word balance, but I'm going to use the word balance here. There is a balance to this, where as a servant leader, we're helping other people to grow, we're serving other people, but we're also making sure that we're doing the work we need to do, that we're taking care of ourselves as well. When we don't take care of ourselves physically, we're not available for the rest of the world. So doing the thing, and that is so important. The other thing, as we talk about doing the thing, is it's breaking through your own barriers and realizing as a leader that sometimes you can't do it on your own. You need help. I talked about having a business coach. I have accountability partners. I have groups that I'm in that help me to hold myself accountable, that help me uncover my blind spots so that I'm able to grow and develop. Because the more I grow and develop and the more I learn, the more I can help other people. And so really, I use a couple of the universal laws when I'm looking at this. And the big one for me that helps me more times than not is the law of cause and effect. And ultimately, when you look at the law of cause and effect, we're always in cause. Every action that we're doing has a reaction and it has an effect. It just depends on what effect we want. So it's really important when you think about courage in your leadership to figure out what it is you want, whether that's a vision for an organization that you work for, whether it's a vision for your own company and goals that you have, but being really conscious of what that is, and then being willing to dig in, like I mentioned before, and turn that lens of awareness onto yourself so that you understand where you might have barriers, where you might self-sabotage. I've done it. Oh my gosh. I know when the pandemic hit, I kind of lost myself in Netflix and was binging Netflix versus doing work that I needed to do. I caught it. I had people lovingly confront me and say, "What are you doing?" And it's important to have those people, as I mentioned before. The other piece is the law of vibration. You've all felt this. You may not have realized it was the law of vibration, but ultimately, how we enter into something, it's quantum physics. We're all energy, right? We're all neurons and protons. And so when you think about energy, when you approach something with a certain energy, people feel that. And so you're going to get back what you're vibrating out into the world. And this is so critical. And think about, we've all had situations where you've been talking to a friend and that friend is just consistently negative, and they're consistently looking at, from the law of polarity, the negative side of the pole. And sometimes it's just heartbreaking. And you kind of leave that interaction feeling a little shaken or a little down from that. That's that law of vibration where you're taking on vibrations from that other person. The same thing, there's people in your lives that when you call them, you always feel energized after talking with them. And I'm not saying that people don't have days and that they have situations. That's not my point. But hopefully you're understanding what I mean by this, because there are certain people in your life that you just always feel like you're filled up after spending time with them. And that's that vibration that they're putting out. And so we do attract that, which is a whole nother law, the law of attraction. But when we think about courage, it's really important for us to be courageous and put out a vibration that we're also wanting to attract. And sometimes it's us putting out vibration so that other people can believe in themselves. So now turning this just a little bit onto the lens of the people that we lead. It takes courage to be a leader. Sometimes it's lonely. Sometimes you're the only one in that spot, whether it be a nonprofit that you're having volunteers that you're leading, whether it be a team you're leading in an organization, any people that you're leading, it takes courage. It takes courage because you have to be vulnerable sometimes. To be really good leaders, it's good to be transparent and let them see your humanness. Now, I am a firm believer too, though, that as a leader, there is a line sometimes that because people want to follow you and to have that influence. I don't mean stepping back and not being authentic. Be your authentic self, but you also don't have to share everything in your personal life with them. But being transparent about how you're feeling about something is important. When I think about courage, it's about confronting people in a loving and gentle manner. It's about having tough conversations. I've joked for years that if I go shopping with a friend, which I'm not a big shopper to begin with, but if I go shopping, I want a friend to tell me whether the jeans that I'm trying on look good or they look terrible. I don't want them just saying, oh, yeah, everything looks good, and letting me walk out of the store with a pair of jeans that make me look terrible. Kind of the same situation. When you're dealing with people and you're leading people, it's important to have those tough conversations. People feel the vibration. If you're not happy with their performance, have a conversation with them. Talk to them about what's going on. Sometimes it's just asking the question, hey, what's going on? I'm noticing some things are slipping. People know, and people come to work to do a good job. They don't come to work to be terrible. And so seeking out and having those tough conversations is so critical. I see more damage done in businesses where they stick their heads in the sand and don't confront in a loving and gentle manner some of the items that need to be confronted with employees, and sometimes even with relatives that are working for them. And so as you deal with those conversations, there are ways to do it where it leaves the tension out of it. And a really key thing as a leader, when we talk about courage, is not taking things personally. We can't take it on. Two things: don't take things personally, but also we can't want something for an employee more than they want it. And that takes courage too, to realize that, and sometimes to step back and let them stumble just a little bit, still guiding and holding them up. You don't want them to fail, but allowing them to learn from their mistakes. The other piece that I talked about earlier for yourself is about blind spots. And it's so important too that as we help people grow, helping them see their own blind spots. And certain people are going to be more open to this than others, but having the courage to say, what do you want? And helping people uncover what they want, and helping uncover then what are some things that potentially they're doing, or actions, the law of cause and effect, that are causing them not to get the effect that they want. And vice versa, making sure too, it takes courage to be able to praise people. And sometimes as a leader, as a servant leader, when you're providing information to people, you're supporting them, you're doing whatever you can to help make them successful without rescuing them, and falling into a victim game mentality. But ultimately, as you're helping those people, sometimes it takes courage to step back and let the team then have the accolades. And just knowing in your heart that you were a big part of that. And realizing you don't have to be the center stage. Sometimes that takes a lot of courage as a leader. particularly because, as leaders, typically if something goes wrong, that's where the finger's pointed. And then if things are going right, it's about sharing that with the team. Those are just a few thoughts I have about courage and leadership. There's so much to this subject. As a matter of fact, I'm thinking about starting to write about this because there's so much that I think needs to happen with this. And as servant leaders, a lot of times that word servant gets a really bad rap. We think it's lay down, let everybody walk all over you, when in fact, it's not. It's about loving people. And I'm not loving someone if I'm not willing to talk to them about some of the tough things, if I'm not willing to praise them and allow them to have the accolades. I think you're getting my drift here, so I don't want to belabor this, but I so appreciate you listening to this and would love to hear more about what you think about courage and leadership. And so once again, this is Debbie Heiser with Faith Infused Leadership. If you have a desire to talk more about this or want to work with me, you can find more information out in my website at www.3, and that's all spelled out, THREEV as in Victor, consulting.com. And I hope to have some conversations with you about courage. Have a great day.